Millionaire spots homeless woman with twins. One look at her ring reveals she's his first love. Let's start with the beautiful prayer. Dear Lord, in a world filled with heartbreak and loss, we thank you for the power of love that heals all wounds. Bless those who are searching for their second chance, those who have lost hope, and those carrying the weight of past mistakes. May they find the courage to forgive, the strength to hold on, and the grace to believe in love again. Let every heart watching this be reminded that no matter how dark the journey, true love always finds its way home. Amen. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that celebrate the power of love and second chances. Share this video with someone who believes in true love and let us know in the comments. Have you ever experienced a love that conquered all odds? We'd love to hear your story. The rain poured relentlessly, blurring the bright lights of New York City into streaks of gold and silver against the darkened streets. Liam Donovan sat behind the wheel of his sleek black Aston Martin, his jaw clenched as he navigated through the city's chaos. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm, yet they couldn't keep up with the downpour, much like how Liam couldn't seem to outrun the emptiness gnawing at his soul. He was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and influence. But inside, Liam felt nothing. His heart, once vibrant and full of dreams, had turned cold over the years, hardened by betrayal and loss. His business empire thrived, but his personal life was barren. Love, to him, was a distant memory, a foolish vulnerability he had sworn off long ago. As he turned onto a quieter street, the dim glow of a broken street lamp caught his eye. Beneath it, barely shielded from the rain by a tattered blanket, sat a woman. She was hunched over, clutching two small children tightly against her chest. The sight made Liam's chest tighten, unexpectedly. Something about her, the curve of her shoulders, the delicate frame, that stirred a long-buried familiarity within him. For reasons he couldn't explain, he slowed his car to a crawl, his sharp eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The woman's clothes were soaked, her hair matted to her face, but even in her disheveled state, there was an elegance about her, a grace that couldn't be masked by hardship. And then he saw it. Her hand shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around the children, and that's when the dim light caught a glint of metal on her finger. Liam's breath hitched. His heart, which hadn't felt anything in years, slammed painfully against his ribs. The ring. It wasn't just any ring, it was his ring. A simple gold band with an intricate design only he and one other person knew the meaning of. The same ring he had given to his first love, Elena, 5 years ago, when he had believed they had a future together, a future that had shattered when she left without a word. Liam's world tilted. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles turning white as memories he thought he'd buried surged to the surface. Could it really be her? He hadn't seen Elena since the day she vanished from his life, leaving only heartbreak and unanswered questions behind. He had convinced himself she'd moved on, that she'd found someone else. But now here she was, or at least someone wearing her ring, sitting on the streets with 2 children that looked no older than 4. A cold wave of realization washed over him. The timeline didn't lie. Could those children be his? Without thinking, Liam slammed on the brakes and pulled over. The car skidded slightly on the wet pavement, but he didn't care. He threw the door open and stepped into the rain, barely noticing the chill that seeped through his expensive suit. His heart was pounding so loudly in his chest he could hardly hear the roar of the city around him. As he approached, the woman stiffened. She lifted her head, and in that moment Liam felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. It was Elena. Her face was thinner, her eyes tired and shadowed, but there was no mistaking the woman he had once loved more than life itself. Those same Hazel eyes, now dulled by hardship, widened in shock as they met his. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Elena. His voice was rough, laced with disbelief and something deeper, pain, hope, anger, a storm of emotions he couldn't control. She clutched the children tighter, as if shielding them from him. The twins, because there were two of them, a boy and a girl, peeked up at him with wide, curious eyes. Liam felt his heart twist again. They had her eyes, but his features. The boy's dark hair, the girl's sharp cheekbones. It was like looking into a mirror of the past and the present colliding. What are you doing here?" Liam finally managed, his voice softer now, almost afraid of the answer. Elena's lips trembled, and for a long, agonizing moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I had nowhere else to go." Those words sliced through Liam like a blade. How had the woman he once vowed to protect ended up like this? Homeless, cold, and clutching two children that could very well be his. "Come with me," he said instinctively, his hand reaching out before he even realized it. "You can't stay out here." But Elena flinched, pulling the children closer. "No, I don't need your charity, Liam." Her words stung more than he expected. Charity. This wasn't about pity. This was about the gaping hole in his chest that seeing her again had ripped wide open. "Eleanor," he said, his voice trembling with something he couldn't define, "I'm not leaving you out here, not like this." She stared at him, her eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and vulnerability. For a moment, Liam saw the woman he had fallen in love with, the fiery spirit who never backed down. But behind that, he saw something else, fear of him or of the past. The twins began to shiver, their small bodies no match for the cold rain. That was the final push Liam needed. "If not for you," he said quietly, "then for them." Eleanor's gaze softened as she looked down at the children. She hesitated, torn between pride and necessity. Finally, with a heavy sigh, she nodded. Liam felt a surge of relief, mixed with something he couldn't name. He guided them to his car, opening the back door so Elena and the twins could climb inside. As he settled into the driver's seat, his mind raced with questions, but one stood out above all. Why had she left? And more importantly, were those children his? As he drove through the rain-soaked streets, Liam knew one thing for certain. His life, once neatly controlled and emotionless, had just been turned upside down by the woman he thought he'd lost forever. And this time, he wasn't going to let her slip away without answers, or without love. The rain drummed a steady beat against the roof of the car as Liam drove through the slick streets, but he barely noticed. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel, his mind a chaotic swirl of memories and questions he couldn't silence. The faint scent of rain mixed with something more delicate, the familiar, soft fragrance of lavender that clung faintly to Eleanor. Even now, Eleanor. He glanced in the rearview mirror, his heart tightening at the sight of her. She sat rigid, her arms protectively wrapped around the twins, her gaze fixed out the window, as if refusing to acknowledge his presence. The children, bundled in their thin coats, huddled against her sides, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, but still curious, darting between him and the city lights flickering by. They looked like him. There was no denying it now. The boy's sharp jawline, the girl's deep, piercing eyes, traits Liam saw every time he glanced in the mirror. But that wasn't what twisted the knife in his chest. It was the fact that he hadn't been there. 5 years ago, Liam and Elena had been inseparable. He remembered how her laughter used to fill his penthouse, how her eyes sparkled when she talked about their future. They had dreams, traveling the world, starting a family, growing old together. He had planned to propose in Paris, under the Eiffel Tower, where he knew her heart would melt. But none of that ever happened. Instead, one day, she was just gone. No calls, no letters, no explanations. One moment, she was his everything, and the next, she was a ghost haunting his empty apartment. At first, Liam had been frantic, searching everywhere, thinking something terrible had happened. But then came the rumors, the whispers that Elena had been seen with another man, that she had left him for someone wealthier, someone who could give her more than Liam ever could. And Liam believed them. The pain of her disappearance had been unbearable, a raw wound that refused to heal. So he buried himself in work, letting his company become his refuge and his prison. He built an empire from the ground up, becoming one of New York's most powerful men. But with every dollar he earned, every deal he closed, his heart grew colder, more distant from the man he used to be, the man who had once believed in love. But now, as he stole another glance at Elena and the twins, everything he had convinced himself of began to crumble. Had he been wrong? Had she never betrayed him at all? He pulled into the underground garage of his luxury apartment building, the soft hum of the car echoing against the concrete walls. Cutting the engine, Liam sat in silence for a moment, trying to steady the storm raging inside him. He turned slightly, his voice rough but steady. "We're here," he said, breaking the heavy silence. Elena's eyes finally met his, and for a fleeting second he saw a flicker of the woman he once knew, the one who had trusted him with her heart. But just as quickly, the walls went back up, her gaze guarded and distant. Liam stepped out first, grabbing an umbrella from the back seat. He opened the door for Elena, shielding her and the twins from the remaining drizzle as they stepped out. The twins clung to her legs, their small faces peeking out with wide, unsure eyes. "This way," Liam murmured, leading them toward the private elevator that would take them straight to his penthouse. As they ascended, the silence between them grew heavier, suffocating. When the doors slid open to reveal his expansive apartment, Elena's breath hitched softly. The space was immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city's skyline, and the sleek, modern decor screamed of wealth and success. But it felt cold, sterile, just like him. Elena hesitated at the threshold, as if stepping inside would mean crossing a line she wasn't ready to face. But the twins tugged at her hands, their innocent curiosity pulling her forward. Liam watched as they cautiously explored the space, their tiny footsteps echoing on the marble floors. "You can stay here tonight," Liam said quietly, breaking the silence. "The guest room is down the hall." Elena nodded stiffly, her eyes never meeting his. She guided the twins to the room, disappearing behind the door. Liam was left standing alone in the vast emptiness of his living room, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on him. He poured himself a glass of scotch, the burn of the alcohol doing little to numb the ache in his chest. How had it come to this? How had they gone from planning a future together to being strangers in the same room? Unable to sit still, Liam found himself pacing the floor, his mind replaying every moment they had shared. Their first kiss under the city lights, the nights they spent dreaming about their life together, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about having children, their children. And now those dreams were shattered fragments scattered across the years they had lost. The door to the guest room creaked open, pulling him from his thoughts. Elena stepped out quietly, her face softer in the dim light, but her eyes still wary. She wasn't the same woman he had loved all those years ago. Life had changed her, hardened her, but so had he. "We need to talk," Liam said, his voice low but firm. Elena hesitated, then nodded. They moved to the living room, the distance between them feeling like miles. Liam sat on the edge of the couch while Elena remained standing, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Why?" His voice cracked with the weight of the question. Why did you leave, Elena? Why didn't you tell me? Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. You think I wanted to leave, Liam? You think I wanted any of this? Then why? His voice rose slightly, frustration and heartbreak bubbling to the surface. I searched for you. I tried to find you. And then I heard things. I thought that I left you for someone else. Elena's voice was bitter, laced with pain. Is that what you believed? Liam's heart pounded. He didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Elena let out a shaky breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Your father, Liam? He told me to leave. He said if I didn't, he'd destroy you. I didn't have a choice. The words hit Liam like a punch to the gut. His father, always controlling, always manipulating, but he had never imagined he would go this far. I tried to tell you, Elena whispered, her voice breaking. I wrote you letters, I called, but I never heard back. And then I found out I was pregnant and I couldn't come back. I thought you didn't want us. Liam felt his world collapse around him. All these years, he had believed the worst of her, while she had been fighting battles he didn't even know existed. The guilt was suffocating. Elena? He stood, closing the distance between them, but she stepped back, her guard still up. It doesn't matter now, she said quietly, her voice hollow. What's done is done. But it did matter. It mattered more than anything. Because the love he thought he had lost was standing right in front of him. And Liam knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to lose her again. The night stretched long and heavy, the city's lights casting soft reflections on the marble floors of Liam's penthouse. Despite the opulence around him, Liam felt a hollow ache deep in his chest, one that no amount of wealth could fill. The echoes of Elena's revelation about his father still rang in his mind, twisting into a mix of guilt, anger, and disbelief. He stared at the closed guest room door, knowing she was just beyond it, probably lying awake like he was, haunted by the ghosts of their past. The image of her soaked and shivering in the rain, clutching those two children, their children, refused to leave his mind. He needed answers, but more than that, he needed to help her. He needed to fix this, even if he wasn't sure how. Unable to bear the weight of silence any longer, Liam rose from the leather couch and walked down the hall, his footsteps echoing in the vast apartment. He hesitated for a moment at the door, his hand hovering over the wood before he finally knocked gently. There was a pause, and then the door creaked open just enough for Eleanor's wary eyes to meet his. She looked exhausted, her hair loose around her shoulders, and shadows of fatigue etched beneath her hazel eyes. But there was still strength in her gaze, a quiet resilience that stirred something deep inside him. "Elena," he began, his voice softer than he intended. "Can we talk?" She didn't answer, but after a moment she stepped back, allowing him to enter. The room was dim, lit only by a small bedside lamp, and the twins were fast asleep, curled up together under a thick blanket. Liam's heart clenched at the sight of them, their small faces peaceful, oblivious to the tension between their parents. Elena crossed her arms over her chest, her posture defensive. "What do you want, Liam?" He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I want to help you, you and the kids." Her eyes narrowed. "We don't need your charity." Liam flinched at her words, the accusation in her tone cutting deeper than he expected. "This isn't about charity," he said firmly. "Elena, you were living on the streets, with our children. Let me help." Her lips trembled slightly, but she quickly hardened her expression. "I've managed this long without you. I'll figure it out." Liam's frustration bubbled to the surface, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Why are you being so stubborn? This isn't just about you anymore. The kids deserve better." Elena's eyes flashed with anger, but beneath it he saw a flicker of hurt. "Don't you dare lecture me about what they deserve. I've done everything I could to protect them. And now I'm offering to help protect them too," Liam countered, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Elena, I know I've made mistakes. I should have looked harder. I should have never believed those lies, but I'm here now. Let me do something right." For a moment, the room was filled with nothing but the soft breathing of the twins. Elena's gaze dropped to the floor, her defenses wavering. Liam stepped closer, his voice softening. "Please, Elena, just stay. For them, if not for me." Her shoulders sagged, and Liam thought she might finally agree. But then she shook her head, her jaw tightening. "I can't. I won't be a burden to you." Liam's heart sank. "You're not a burden," he whispered. You're the only thing I've ever wanted." Her breath hitched, and for a brief moment he saw the woman he had fallen in love with, the one who had once believed in their future, but just as quickly the walls went back up. "I can't do this, Liam," she whispered. "I can't trust you, not after everything." Liam felt a sharp pang in his chest. He had thought his wealth, his status could solve any problem, but none of that mattered here. This wasn't about money, this was about trust. Trust he had broken without even realizing it. "Then let me earn it back," he said quietly. "Stay, just for a while. If not for me, then for the kids." Elena hesitated, her gaze flickering to the sleeping twins. Liam could see the war raging within her, the fierce pride that had kept her going all these years, battling against the desperate need for stability and safety for her children. Finally she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Just for a few days," she murmured, "until I figure things out." Liam nodded, relief flooding through him. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes softening as they met hers. He wanted to say more, to tell her how much he regretted everything, how much he still cared. But he knew words wouldn't be enough. Not yet. As he turned to leave, Elena's voice stopped him. "Liam." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "They're yours," she said quietly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The twins, they're your children." The world seemed to tilt beneath him. His heart thundered in his chest, a mix of overwhelming joy and crushing guilt flooding through him. He wanted to rush back to her, to hold her, to thank her for giving him the greatest gift he never knew he had. But the look in her eyes kept him rooted in place, the cautious, fragile hope that he knew could shatter with one wrong move. "I'll be here," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For them. For you. As long as it takes." Elena didn't respond, but the tension in her shoulders eased slightly, and that was enough for Liam. He left the room quietly, closing the door behind him, and leaned against the wall, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time in years, Liam Donovan wasn't thinking about mergers or profits. His mind was consumed by one thought: winning back the woman he had lost and becoming the father his children deserved. And this time, he wasn't going to let pride, misunderstandings, or the past stand in his way. The next few days passed in a haze of unspoken words and tense silences. Liam and Elena lived under the same roof, yet it felt like a fragile truce rather than a reunion. The twins filled the apartment with innocent laughter, their presence a bittersweet reminder of the years Liam had missed. Every time he looked at them, a wave of guilt and longing crashed over him. But it was the glint of the ring on Elena's finger that haunted him the most. It was the very same ring he had given her 5 years ago, a delicate band of gold with a small, shimmering sapphire, the color of the sky, the day he first told her he loved her. The fact that she still wore it gnawed at him. Why? If she had truly moved on, why hold on to something so deeply tied to their past? One evening, after the twins had fallen asleep, Liam found Elena on the balcony, staring out over the glittering city skyline. The cool breeze played with her hair, and for a moment she looked like the woman he used to know, the one who had stolen his heart with a single smile. Summoning his courage, Liam stepped onto the balcony, the soft click of the door alerting her to his presence. She didn't turn to look at him, but she didn't walk away either. That was progress. "Eleanor," he began, his voice gentle, almost tentative. "Why do you still wear the ring?" She stiffened, her fingers instinctively curling around the band as if to protect it. For a long moment she said nothing, the city's hum filling the silence between them. Then with a sigh, she finally spoke. "I tried to take it off once," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "But it felt like giving up, like admitting it was really over." Liam's heart clenched. He moved closer, standing beside her but careful not to invade her space. "But you thought I didn't want you, that I moved on." She nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "I did, but part of me always hoped maybe I was wrong." Liam's throat tightened. The pain in her voice was a mirror of his own, reflecting years of misunderstandings and lost chances. "Eleanor, will you have dinner with me?" he asked suddenly, the words spilling out before he could overthink them. She finally turned to face him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Dinner?" he nodded. "Just dinner, I think we need to talk, really talk." She hesitated, searching his face for signs of hidden motives, but all she saw was sincerity, and maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of the man she had once loved. "Okay," she whispered. "One dinner." The following evening, Liam pulled out all the stops. He had his private chef prepare Elena's favorite dishes, meals she hadn't tasted in years, but that he had never forgotten. The dining room was softly lit with candles, casting a warm glow over the table. He wanted everything to be perfect, not to impress her with his wealth, but to show her he still remembered the little things. Elena appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple dress he found more beautiful than any designer gown. She looked hesitant, but curious, her eyes flickering over the table before settling on him. "This is a lot," she murmured. Liam offered a small, nervous smile. "You deserve it." They sat across from each other, the clinking of silverware the only sound for the first few minutes. The tension was palpable, but slowly as they ate, the walls began to crumble. "You really remembered all my favorite dishes?" Elena finally asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Liam chuckled softly. "Of course. How could I forget you ordering mushroom risotto every time we went out?" A faint smile tugged at her lips, and for a brief moment the years melted away. But then the shadows crept back in, and Liam knew it was time to face the truth. "Elena," he said gently, setting down his fork. "I need to know. What really happened? Why did you leave?" Elena's smile faded, and she looked down at her hands, twisting the ring around her finger. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the past. "It wasn't me who left, Liam," she whispered finally, her voice trembling. "It was your father." Liam's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, gathering the strength to relive the pain. "He came to see me one night. He said if I didn't leave you, he'd ruin you, destroy everything you'd worked for. He told me I wasn't good enough for you, that I was holding you back. And then he—" Her voice broke, and she blinked back tears. "He made sure you'd never hear from me again. He intercepted my letters, my calls. I tried, Liam, I tried so hard to reach you." Liam's world tilted. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place, painting a picture more devastating than he could have imagined. His father's manipulations had stolen years from them, years they could never get back. "I thought you left me," he whispered, his voice raw with regret. "I thought you didn't love me anymore." Eleanor met his gaze, her eyes glistening. "I never stopped loving you, Liam, but I thought you moved on. I thought you didn't want us." Liam reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The warmth of her skin sent a jolt through him, a reminder of everything they had lost and everything they could still have. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for believing him, for not fighting harder. I should have known. I should have trusted you." Elena's lips quivered, but she didn't pull her hand away. "It wasn't your fault, Liam. We were both victims." For a long moment they sat in silence, their hands intertwined, the past finally laid bare between them. The years of pain and misunderstanding didn't vanish, but they no longer felt insurmountable. "I still love you," Liam said quietly, his eyes searching hers. "I don't know if I deserve another chance, but I want to try. For you, for our kids." Eleanor's eyes softened, and a tear slipped down her cheek, but this time it wasn't just a tear of sadness. It was hope. Fragile, tentative, but real. "I want to try too," she whispered. Liam's heart soared. He stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her. Gently, he took her hand, his thumb brushing over the ring. "Then let's start over," he murmured. "Not because of the past, but because of the future." Elena nodded, her tears falling freely now, and as Liam leaned in, the lips met in a kiss that spoke of lost time, second chances, and a love that had endured against all odds. The ring on her finger no longer told a story of heartbreak. It was now a symbol of a love reborn. The flickering candlelight from their dinner cast soft shadows on the walls, but the warmth in the room couldn't ease the storm brewing inside Liam. As he sat across from Elena, the earlier confession about his father's betrayal still echoed in his mind. But there was something else gnawing at him now, something undeniable. His eyes drifted to the hallway where the twins were sleeping in the guest room. Their laughter from earlier that day replayed in his head. The way they scrunched their noses when they giggled, the little dimples that appeared when they smiled, the piercing blue eyes that mirrored his own reflection. It wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. Liam took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed to know the truth, even if it shattered him. "Elena," he began quietly, his voice steady but filled with tension. "The twins, they look like me." Elena froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. The color drained from her face, and her eyes darted away from his, focusing on the untouched food in front of her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set her fork down, and Liam felt his pulse quicken. "Liam," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Are they mine?" he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air between them. Elena's shoulders sagged under the weight of the truth she could no longer hide. She pressed her lips together, fighting back the flood of emotions rising within her. But Liam could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the fear, the heartbreak. Finally she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're yours." Liam's world tilted, his breath catching in his throat. A mixture of emotions surged through him, shock, anger, disbelief, but above all a crushing sense of loss. He had children he hadn't known about for 5 long years. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Elena wiped at her tears, her hands shaking. "I tried, Liam. I wrote letters, I called, Her voice broke, and she swallowed hard before continuing. But after your father's threats, after you never responded, I thought you didn't want us. I thought you had moved on." Liam's heart ached at her words. The image of her alone, pregnant and scared, trying desperately to reach him while he drowned himself in work, believing she had betrayed him. It was almost too much to bear. "I would have never turned my back on you," he whispered, his voice thick with regret. "Or on them." Eleanor's eyes filled with fresh tears, and she reached across the table, placing her trembling hand over his. "I didn't know that, Liam. I was scared. And when the twins were born, I didn't know how to find you anymore. I thought you hated me." Liam squeezed her hand gently, his heart shattering at the thought of everything they had lost. "I never hated you, Elena. I was heartbroken, but I never stopped loving you." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the years apart pressing down on them. Liam's mind raced with thoughts of all the milestones he had missed, their first steps, their first words, the countless nights Elena must have stayed up, alone, caring for them. "I missed everything," he whispered, his voice filled with pain. "I missed their whole lives." Elena's grip tightened around his hand. "But you're here now, Liam. That's what matters." Liam looked into her eyes, seeing not just the woman he had loved, but the mother who had sacrificed everything to protect their children. He reached up, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "I want to be part of their lives, Elena," he said softly. "I want to be their father." Elena nodded, her eyes shimmering with hope. "They deserve to know you, Liam, and you deserve to know them." As the weight of their confession settled, Liam felt something shift inside him. The bitterness and anger he had carried for years began to fade, replaced by a fierce determination to make things right. He wasn't just fighting for Elena anymore. He was fighting for his family. Later that night, as the apartment grew quiet and the city lights twinkled outside, Liam found himself standing at the door to the twins' room. He hesitated for a moment, his hand resting on the doorknob, before quietly pushing it open. The soft glow of a nightlight illuminated the room, casting gentle shadows over the two small figures asleep in the bed. Liam's breath caught in his throat as he took them in, their tiny chests rising and falling with each peaceful breath, their faces angelic in sleep. He stepped closer, his heart swelling with a love he hadn't known he was capable of. Kneeling beside the bed, he reached out, brushing a stray curl from his daughter's forehead. She stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep before settling again. Liam felt a lump rise in his throat, and he whispered softly, "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you, but I'm here now, and I'm never leaving." The words felt like a vow, one he intended to keep no matter what. Behind him, he heard the soft creak of the door, and he turned to see Eleanor standing there, watching him with tears in her eyes. She crossed the room quietly, kneeling beside him. "They look so much like you," Liam whispered, his voice filled with awe. Elena smiled softly, wiping at her tears. "And they have your stubbornness too." Liam chuckled quietly, his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. He turned to Elena, his eyes searching hers. "Thank you for giving me them. Even if I didn't know. They're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Elena's eyes shimmered with emotion, and she reached out, cupping his cheek. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to us too, Liam. We just didn't know we still had you." For a long moment they stayed there, the past melting away as they embraced the fragile, beautiful present. Liam knew there were still challenges ahead, wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. He had found his family again. and he wasn't going to let them go. Liam stared out of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights of New York blinking like distant stars beneath the night sky. But no matter how dazzling the view, nothing could distract him from the storm brewing inside his chest. His mind replayed the truth over and over again. His father's betrayal, Elena's heartbreak, and the lost years with his children. The weight of it all pressed against his ribs, making it hard to breathe. He had spent years believing Elena had abandoned him, only to find out that the person he trusted the most, his own father, had been the architect of his heartbreak. His father had stolen not just his happiness, but precious time with his children, time he could never get back. A deep ache settled in his heart. 5 years. He'd missed their first steps, their first words, their birthdays, and every little moment in between. He imagined Eleanor alone, struggling to raise the twins while he drowned himself in work, oblivious to the family he had out there. But now that he knew the truth, there was no way he was letting them slip through his fingers again. The next morning, Liam found Elena in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the twins. The soft hum of her voice as she sang quietly to herself tugged at his heart. She looked so natural, so beautiful standing there, but he could see the weariness in her eyes, the same weariness he felt in his soul. "Elena," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her eyes meeting his with a guarded expression. The twins were still asleep, leaving them a rare moment alone. "I've been thinking," Liam began, stepping closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "I can't change the past, and I'll regret missing those years with you and the kids for the rest of my life. But I don't want to waste any more time." Elena's gaze softened slightly, but the tension in her shoulders didn't fade. She set down the spoon she was holding and crossed her arms, waiting. "I don't just want to help you, Elena," he continued, his voice sincere and steady. "I want you. I want us. I want to be the father our kids deserve. But more than that, I want to be the man you can trust again." Elena's eyes shimmered with emotion, but she quickly blinked it away, shaking her head slightly. "Liam, it's not that simple." "I know it's not," he admitted, taking another step closer. "I know I hurt you. Even if it wasn't intentional, I should have fought harder for us. I should have known something wasn't right. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Elena sighed, running a hand through her hair as she leaned against the counter. "You don't understand, Liam. It's not just about forgiving you. It's about trusting again. Trusting that you won't disappear when things get hard, that you won't choose your business over us, that—" Her voice wavered, and she looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That I won't end up broken again." Liam's heart clenched at her words. He had been so focused on his own pain that he hadn't fully grasped just how much Elena had endured. She had carried the weight of betrayal, heartbreak, and motherhood all on her own. And now he was asking her to open herself up to the possibility of being hurt again. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and gently took her hands in his. She tensed for a moment but didn't pull away. "Elena," he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. But I can promise that I will fight for you every single day. I'll fight for our family. I want to build a life with you, not just because of the twins, but because I still love you. I never stopped." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek, and Liam reached up, brushing it away with the pad of his thumb. His touch was tender, reverent, as if she might shatter if he wasn't careful. "But how do I know this isn't just guilt talking?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How do I know you're not doing this because you feel obligated? But how do I know this isn't just guilt talking?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How do I know you're not doing this because you feel obligated?" Liam's heart ached at her doubt, but he understood it. She had every reason to question his motives, but his feelings were as clear and undeniable as the morning sun streaming through the windows. "Because I felt this before I even knew about the twins," he confessed, his voice low and sincere. "The moment I saw you on that street, my heart knew. It's always been you, Elena, no matter how much time has passed." Elena's breath hitched, and for a long, heart-stopping moment, they just stared at each other, the space between them charged with unspoken emotions. But then she pulled back slightly, her walls still firmly in place. "I need time, Liam," she whispered. "I can't just fall back into your arms like nothing happened. I need to be sure." Liam nodded, though disappointment flickered in his chest. But he understood. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "Take all the time you need," he said softly, his eyes filled with unwavering determination. "I'll wait. I'll prove to you that I'm here for the long haul." Elena nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you, Liam." For the next few weeks, Liam devoted himself to proving his love. Not through grand gestures or lavish gifts, but through quiet, consistent actions. He spent time with the twins, learning their favorite games, reading them bedtime stories, and showing up for every scraped knee and tearful moment. He cooked dinner with Elena, helped her around the apartment, and listened when she needed to talk. Slowly, the walls around Elena's heart began to crumble. She found herself smiling more, laughing at Liam's jokes, and leaning on him in ways she hadn't allowed herself to in years. The twins adored him, and seeing them together warmed her heart in ways she couldn't ignore. But trust was a fragile thing. One night, after the twins had gone to bed, Liam found Elena on the balcony again, staring out at the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked softly, joining her. Elena glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Just thinking." "About us?" he ventured, his heart pounding. She nodded, turning to face him fully. "I'm scared, Liam," she admitted. "Scared that if I let myself love you again, I'll get hurt." Liam took her hands in his gaze steady and filled with love. "I'm scared too, Elena. But love is about taking risks, and I'd rather risk everything than spend another day without you." Elena's eyes shimmered with tears, but this time they were tears of hope. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let's take that risk." Liam's heart soared, and without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And as their lips met in a tender, soul-stirring kiss, they both knew that this was their second chance, a chance to build something even stronger than before. Because love, even when broken, could always find a way to heal. Liam had always been a man who thrived on challenges. Building his empire from the ground up had been no easy feat, but nothing compared to the delicate work of mending the broken pieces of his relationship with Eleanor, and forging a bond with the twins he never knew he had. He threw himself into this new mission with the same determination he once reserved for boardroom negotiations. But this was different. This was personal. Every morning, Liam would show up at Elena's modest apartment with breakfast in hand. Not the fancy pastries from uptown bakeries that he was used to, but pancakes shaped like dinosaurs and smiley faces, much to the twins' delight. He learned their favorite cartoons, how they liked their peanut butter sandwiches cut, triangles for Emma, squares for Ethan, and discovered that bedtime stories were far more complicated than any business deal. At first, the twins were wary of him. They clung to Elena, casting curious glances at Liam as if trying to figure out where he fit into their world. But Liam was patient. He didn't push. He simply showed up, day after day, proving through his actions that he wasn't going anywhere. One evening, after a particularly spirited game of hide-and-seek in the small apartment, Emma surprised him. She crawled into his lap, her tiny fingers reaching for the watch on his wrist. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" she asked, her big blue eyes, the same shade as Liam's, looking up at him with innocent hope. Liam's heart swelled. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "Every day, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, the twins began to trust him. They'd run to the door when he arrived, shouting his name, their laughter filling the apartment like sunshine on a cloudy day. Liam cherished every moment, every smile, every sleepy hug at bedtime. But it wasn't just the twins Liam was working to win over. Elena. She was the center of his world, the woman whose absence had left a hole in his heart for 5 long years. And while the twins were quick to forgive, Elena was a different story. She watched him carefully, her heart torn between the love she still felt and the fear of being hurt again. Liam saw it in the way her eyes softened when she caught him reading to the twins, the way her lips curved into a reluctant smile when he fumbled in the kitchen trying to make pancakes. But he also saw the hesitation, the walls she kept firmly in place, guarding her heart. One night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Liam found Eleanor sitting on the small balcony, her knees drawn to her chest as she stared out at the city lights. The cool night air wrapped around them, but it was the distance in her eyes that sent a chill through Liam's heart. "Mind if I join you?" he asked softly. Elena glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the city's glow. She nodded, and Liam took a seat beside her, their shoulders brushing lightly. They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the city below filling the gaps between them. Finally, Liam spoke. "I know I've said this before, but I'm sorry, Elena, for everything. I hate that you went through all of that alone." Elena sighed, her gaze dropping to her hands. "It wasn't just about being alone, Liam. It was about feeling abandoned, betrayed. I thought you didn't care, and even now—" Her voice trailed off, and Liam felt the weight of her words settle over him. "I care," he said firmly, reaching for her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't grip his hand either. "I've never stopped caring, and I know I can't erase the past, but I want to build a future, with you and the kids." Elena's eyes met his, filled with uncertainty and longing. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "I know," Liam said, his voice gentle, "but I'm here, Elena, for the long haul. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that." As the days turned into weeks, Liam kept his promise. He became a constant presence in their lives, not just as a father, but as a partner. He helped with homework, cooked dinners, even when they turned out disastrous, and stayed up late when the twins had nightmares. And slowly he saw the cracks in Elena's walls grow wider. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Liam found himself laughing at something silly Emma had said. He glanced over at Elena, expecting her usual polite smile, but what he saw stopped him in his tracks. She was looking at him differently. The guarded distance in her eyes had softened, replaced by something warmer, something closer to the love they once shared. But just as Liam felt hope blooming in his heart, life had other plans. It was a chilly Friday evening when the doorbell rang. Liam was playing with the twins in the living room while Eleanor was in the kitchen. Expecting a package, she called out, "Can you get that, Liam?" Liam ruffled Ethan's hair and made his way to the door, expecting nothing more than a delivery. But when he opened it, his entire world tilted. Standing on the other side was his father, the man who had orchestrated the lies, who had stolen 5 years of happiness from Liam and Elena, stood there as if nothing had happened. His father's expression was cold, calculated, a stark contrast to the warmth Liam had been trying to cultivate in his life. "Liam," his father greeted, his voice smooth but lacking any real emotion. "We need to talk." Liam's jaw clenched. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him to shield Elena and the twins from the confrontation. "There's nothing to talk about," he hissed. "Oh, but there is," his father replied, his eyes glinting with something dark. "You've been playing house with that woman and her children, but you're forgetting who you are, Liam. You're a Donovan, and Donovan men don't get tied down by—" Before he could finish, Liam's fist connected with his father's jaw, sending the older man stumbling backward. Liam's chest heaved with rage, years of betrayal boiling over in that one punch. "Stay away from my family," Liam growled. "You've done enough damage. If you come near Elena or the kids again, I swear—" But his father only laughed, a cruel hollow sound. "You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming." With that ominous warning, his father turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Liam standing there, his heart pounding with fear and fury. When Liam returned inside, Elena immediately noticed the tension in his face. "Liam, what happened?" she asked, concern etched in her features. But Liam couldn't bring himself to tell her. Not yet. He didn't want to see the fear in her eyes. Didn't want to risk the fragile trust they were rebuilding. So he forced a smile and said, "Nothing. Just a mistake at the door." But deep down, Liam knew this wasn't over. His father's return was a shadow looming over their happiness, threatening to unravel everything Liam had worked so hard to mend. And as he watched Elena tuck the twins into bed that night, his heart ached with the knowledge that their fight for love wasn't over, but Liam was ready. Because this time he wasn't just fighting for love. He was fighting for his family. And he wouldn't let anything, not even his own blood, stand in the way. Liam sat at the mahogany desk in his home office, the dim glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The thick, formal envelope lay in front of him, its seal already broken. The letter inside, however, had shattered more than just wax. It had fractured the fragile sense of peace he'd begun to build with Elena and the twins. The words burned in his mind. Should Liam Donovan rekindle any romantic relationship with Elena Hart, he shall forfeit all rights to the Donovan estate, including assets, shares, and properties effective immediately. It was a clause so cruel, so vindictive, it could only have come from one man, his father. Even in death, the old man's grip extended beyond the grave, trying to control Liam's life, his heart, his happiness. Liam's fingers tightened around the edges of the paper until his knuckles turned white. His father had always been a manipulative, calculating man, but Liam had never imagined he'd stoop this low. To weaponize love, to make Liam choose between his fortune and the woman he adored. It was the final act of a man who had never believed in love, who had built an empire on power and control, and now wanted to ensure his son remained shackled to the same ruthless legacy. But Liam wasn't that man anymore. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the polished floor, and paced the room. His mind raced. The Donovan empire was worth billions. It wasn't just about the money. It was the company he had poured his soul into, the employees who depended on him, the legacy he had hoped to reshape from his father's shadows. But what was all of that compared to Elena? To his children? He paused at the window, staring out at the sprawling city below. The lights flickered like distant stars, but none of them could illuminate the path ahead. Could he really walk away from everything he'd built? Would Elena even want him to make such a sacrifice? The door creaked open behind him. Liam turned to see Elena standing there, her expression soft but concerned. "Liam," she said quietly, stepping into the room. "You've been in here for hours. What's going on?" Liam hesitated, his heart pounding. Part of him wanted to shield her from this, to carry the burden alone. But they'd promised to be honest, to face things together. She deserved the truth. Taking a deep breath, he handed her the letter. Elena's brow furrowed as she read, her eyes scanning the cruel words. As she reached the end, her face paled, and she looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Liam, this is insane." "I know," he whispered, stepping closer, "but it's real. If I stay with you, I lose everything." For a long moment, silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Elena's eyes shimmered with emotion, but Liam couldn't quite read her expression. "I won't let you do this," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "I won't let you throw away your entire life because of me." Liam felt a surge of frustration and love all at once. He cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Elena, listen to me," he said firmly. "You're not asking me to do anything. This isn't a sacrifice. It's a choice. And I choose you. I choose our children. I choose a life filled with love over a life filled with empty boardrooms and hollow victories." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. "But Liam, this is your legacy." Liam shook his head, his thumb brushing away her tears. My legacy is with you and the twins. Not in some cold office, not under my father's shadow. I'm not that man anymore, Elena. I don't care about the money, I care about us." Elena's lips trembled, and for a moment Liam feared she might pull away. But then she surged forward, wrapping her arms around his neck and burying her face in his chest. "I love you, Liam," she whispered against his skin, "but I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." Liam held her tighter, his heart swelling with emotion. "You're not the reason I'm losing anything. You're the reason I'm gaining everything that matters." For the next few days, Liam worked tirelessly to disentangle himself from the Donovan empire. Board meetings turned hostile. Lawyers scrambled to find loopholes in the will, but the clause was airtight. His father had made sure of that. Associates who once respected him began to distance themselves, fearing the collapse of the Donovan empire under Liam's decision. But Liam stood firm. He sold off shares, transferred responsibilities, and by the end of the week, he had walked away from everything he had built. On the night of his final meeting, Liam returned to the apartment exhausted but lighter than he had felt in years. Elena greeted him at the door, her eyes searching his face for signs of regret. "Well?" she whispered. Liam smiled, pulling her into his arms. "It's done. I'm free." Eleanor cupped his face, her eyes filled with love and disbelief. "You really did it. I'd do it again 1,000 times over if it means I get to be with you." Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of new beginnings, of battles fought and won, of a future unburdened by the past. It was soft, lingering, but full of promise. Weeks passed, and while they had to adjust to a more modest lifestyle, their home was filled with laughter and love. Liam found joy in the simple things, making breakfast with the twins, lazy afternoons with Elena, bedtime stories that turned into giggles under the covers. He even started a new business, one that reflected his true values, free from his father's influence. One evening, as they sat on the couch with the twins asleep in their room, Elena rested her head on Liam's shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. Liam thought for a moment, his fingers gently tracing circles on her arm. "No," he whispered, "because I have everything I need right here." Elena tilted her head to look at him, her eyes shining with love. "I'm proud of you, Liam." "I'm proud of us," he replied, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. "We built something my father could never touch." As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Liam realized that his father's final attempt to control him had backfired spectacularly. In trying to force Liam into a life devoid of love, his father had only pushed him closer to the very thing that mattered most, because true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or properties. It was measured in love, in family, in the moments that made life worth living, and in that, Liam Donovan was the richest man in the world. It had been months since Liam had walked away from the Donovan empire, months since he had chosen Elena and their children over his father's shadowy legacy. They had rebuilt their lives layer by layer, creating a foundation that felt strong and real. The small, cozy apartment they shared became a sanctuary, a space where love blossomed and every moment spent together felt like a gift. Elena, once so hesitant, now allowed herself to trust him again. She watched him play with the twins, the bond between father and children growing stronger each day. She saw the way Liam loved them, not out of obligation but out of devotion, as if they had always been his. Yet, just when things seemed to be perfect, a shadow from the past crept back into their lives, threatening to tear everything apart. One evening, Elena sat at the kitchen table, sorting through some bills when her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat as she unlocked the screen, but the words that greeted her made her stomach turn. "Liam is only helping you because of guilt. He'll never love you the way he once did. He's just trying to make things right after abandoning you. Don't be fooled by his gestures. He's a liar, just like his father." Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. The words blurred before her eyes as her mind began to spiral. Guilt. That was the one thing she had always feared. Was Liam only here because of some sense of responsibility? Had he truly forgiven her, or was he simply trying to redeem himself for his past mistakes? She couldn't tell. Was she fooling herself? She had let herself believe that their love had been rekindled, that they had found their way back to each other. But what if everything she thought she knew was wrong? What if she was just a project, a burden he had taken on because of his guilt? Tears pricked at the edges of her eyes. She had lived through betrayal once before, and she couldn't bear the thought of living through it again, especially not at the hands of the man she had come to trust with her heart and her children. Her thoughts raced uncontrollably. She grabbed her phone looking for reassurance, searching for an explanation. Should she confront him? Should she ask him directly? But just the thought of doing so made her feel vulnerable, afraid that her worst fears might be true. Before she could decide, she heard the sound of the front door opening. Liam's voice filtered through from the hallway, muffled by the sound of his footsteps. He was home. Elena wiped her eyes quickly, trying to hide the tears. But the pain in her chest remained, gnawing at her. She needed time to think. She couldn't bear to face him in that moment, not when her emotions were so raw, so tangled. Silently, she slipped out of the kitchen and into the twins' room, where they were playing with their toys. The familiar sight of their innocent faces should have been comforting, but instead, the weight of the message pressed heavily on her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Mummy!" Emma's small voice broke through Elena's thoughts. The little girl looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. "What's wrong?" Elena forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just a little tired." But Emma didn't seem convinced. The twins had always been perceptive, picking up on her moods, sensing when something was off. Eleanor hugged Emma tightly, feeling her heartache deepen. How could she protect them from the pain she had felt for so long if she couldn't even protect herself? The hours stretched on, and Elena's mind remained consumed by the message. It felt like a poison that was slowly seeping into her thoughts. How could she face Liam after everything they had been through? How could she trust him again when doubt gnawed at her heart? When Liam came into the room later that evening, she didn't know how to look at him. She had spent so much time rebuilding their relationship, only for this shadow of doubt to destroy everything in an instant. "Eleanor," Liam said softly, his voice full of warmth as he approached her. "The kid's asleep." She nodded, trying to sound normal, but it came out strained. "Yeah, they're asleep." Liam watched her closely, his eyes narrowing with concern. "What's going on? You've been distant tonight." Elena didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. She couldn't tell him the truth, not yet, not until she had figured it out for herself. She had to know whether the love he had shown her was real, or if it had all been part of some grand gesture of guilt. I think I need some time," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to think." Liam's expression softened with concern. "Elena, please, what's wrong? You're scaring me." But Elena couldn't explain. The uncertainty and the fear were too overwhelming, and in her mind, the message from the unknown person had only deepened her doubts. "I just need some space," she repeated, her voice firmer this time. "I need to think things through. Alone." Liam looked taken aback. Alone. "Elena, please, don't shut me out. We've been through too much to let this tear us apart." But Elena was already shaking her head, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. She couldn't stay, not when she was unsure of everything. I'm sorry, Liam," she whispered before turning and rushing out of the room, grabbing her jacket from the hallway. Liam stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched her leave. What had just happened? Elena didn't look back as she stepped into the hallway and out the door. She had to get away, had to clear her head. She grabbed the twins' things, throwing some clothes and essentials into a bag. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, a cyclone of fear and insecurity. As she reached the door to leave, Liam's voice called out from behind her. "Eleanor, please don't do this. You're making a mistake. We can talk through this, please." But Eleanor didn't respond. Her heart ached with every step she took, but she couldn't stay. Not when doubt had clouded everything she once believed. Maybe the message was right. Maybe Liam didn't love her anymore. Maybe he was just pretending for the sake of the kids. The night air was cold, biting at her skin, but the chill she felt inside was far deeper. The further she walked, the more she felt herself falling away from the warmth of Liam's love, unsure of what was real and what wasn't. Meanwhile, Liam collapsed onto the couch, his hands running through his hair in disbelief. What had gone wrong? His heart shattered as he realized she was gone, leaving him to grapple with a pain that felt all too familiar. He knew one thing for sure. He would stop at nothing to win her back. He had already lost her once. He couldn't lose her again. But Elena, in her heartache and fear, didn't know that yet. The path ahead was clouded by shadows of the past, and for the moment, the only thing she could hold on to was the echo of her own doubt. And so, once again, they found themselves at a crossroads, with nothing but the remnants of broken trust and the looming question of whether love could heal all wounds. Liam stood in the middle of their living room, staring at the empty doorway where Eleanor had left only hours ago. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing in panic. He had never felt so helpless, so vulnerable. The moment she had walked out, everything he had fought for, the love they had rebuilt, the family they had become, seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. And now, in the silence that followed her departure, it felt like he was losing her all over again. He tried to push aside the gnawing feeling of dread, but it consumed him. Elena, his Elena, the woman he had promised to protect and love for the rest of his life. And now he had let her walk away, unknowingly feeding the fear and insecurities she had harbored for so long. Liam's eyes darted to the twins' empty rooms, the sound of their laughter from earlier still echoing in his ears. They were his world, his future, and Elena was the heart of it all. Without her, it would all fall apart. I can't let her go. I won't lose her again. In that moment, the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He couldn't wait around, hoping she would come back. He had to find her. He had to make her understand that he wasn't driven by guilt, but by love, a love he would never let go of again. With a swift movement, Liam grabbed his phone and began making calls. He knew the wealth and connections he had built over the years would help him find Elena, even if it meant using every resource at his disposal. But this wasn't just about power or money. It was about saving his family. Hours turned into a blur of frantic phone calls, surveillance footage, and endless searches. Every person who might have known where Eleanor had gone was contacted. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers who might have seen her. He didn't care how long it took. He was relentless. He had already lost too much to lose her again. As the night stretched on, the darkness outside mirrored the despair Liam felt inside. Mind. Who had sent that message? Why had it shattered everything they had worked for? He knew the answer. It was a cowardly attempt to break them apart, and it had nearly succeeded. The clock seemed to tick louder, the seconds dragging by with excruciating slowness. He needed to find her before it was too late. By the early morning hours, Liam received a breakthrough. A contact from a mutual friend of Elena's had confirmed that she had been seen at a small, out-of-the-way hotel on the outskirts of the city. Without a second thought, he grabbed his coat, ignoring the exhaustion that weighed him down. Elena was waiting, and he couldn't lose a single moment. The drive felt like an eternity, each minute that passed amplifying the anxiety in his chest. He wasn't sure what he was going to say when he found her. What could he say? He had made mistakes, too many to count, and now his heart was racing with the fear that it might all be too late to make it right. As he pulled up to the hotel, the first light of dawn broke across the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the building. It seemed so small, so insignificant compared to the enormity of the emotions he carried with him. But in this moment, this hotel was everything. It was the place where he would either reclaim his future or lose it forever. Liam rushed inside, asking the front desk for Elena's room number. His hands trembled as he gripped the counter, his mind replaying every moment they had shared, every word they had spoken. The receptionist, noticing his urgency, handed him a key, without question. He climbed the stairs, two at a time, each step an echo of his desperation. This was it. He was going to face her, pour out his heart, and do whatever it took to make her see that he loved her. At the end of the hallway, room 307 stood before him, like a final barrier between him and the woman he couldn't live without. He knocked softly, his breath caught in his throat. "Elena!" he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. There was no answer. His heart skipped a beat, and for a terrifying moment he thought she might have left again. But then the door creaked open, and there she was, standing before him, her face tired, her eyes red from crying, but still undeniably beautiful. Liam took a step forward, his voice breaking with emotion. "Elena, please, don't leave me. I know I've made mistakes, but I need you to understand that I love you. I've always loved you. Elena's gaze flickered, and for a split second Liam thought she might turn away from him once again. But then something changed in her eyes. The faintest hint of the woman he had once known, the woman he still loved, appeared. "You don't understand, Liam." Elena's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes downcast. I thought you were helping me because you felt guilty. I thought I was just something you had to fix. I couldn't handle that. I couldn't live with the idea that I wasn't enough for you." Liam's heart clenched at the raw pain in her voice. He reached out for her, his hands trembling as he gently cupped her face. "Elena, look at me, please." Her eyes lifted to meet his, and Liam saw the doubt and the hurt still lingering there. But there was something else too, hope, a small flicker of trust, buried deep within the layers of pain. "I didn't leave you because of guilt," Liam continued, his voice low and earnest. "I left because I thought I had to, because I was too blinded by everything I thought I knew about myself. But I was wrong. I love you. I've loved you every single day since we first met, and I'll love you for the rest of my life. The children are mine, and I'm not walking away from you again. You and them, you're my future." Tears welled up in Elena's eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to lean into his touch. "I'm so scared, Liam," she whispered. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I'll earn your trust, Eleanor. I'll spend every day of my life earning it if that's what it takes, but please don't shut me out. We've come too far to let this destroy us. I love you." And then, as if the weight of her doubts finally broke, Elena closed the distance between them, her arms wrapping around him. She pressed her forehead against his chest, sobbing quietly. Liam held her close, his heart swelling with relief. He whispered into her hair, promising her that he would never let her go. "We'll figure this out together. Always together." And in that moment, in her arms, he knew that no matter the obstacles they faced, they could overcome anything as long as they were together. Elena stood there, her body trembling from the weight of everything that had led them to this moment. She had spent years carrying the burden of pain and heartbreak, believing that the love she had once shared with Liam was gone forever. But now, in his arms, the pain seemed to dissolve, leaving room only for the love that had never truly left them. She pulled back slightly, looking up into his eyes. Liam's gaze was filled with a raw vulnerability, a tenderness that spoke volumes. His words had touched her in ways she couldn't explain. His love, so genuine, was now impossible to deny. "I've hurt you, Elena," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never meant to. I never meant for you to feel abandoned or unloved. I was a fool, blinded by pride and fear." Tears began to spill from Elena's eyes, the years of holding on to her resentment and anger coming to the surface. She felt the weight of the love they had shared, the memories of their time together, flood her heart once again. It had been so long, but in his arms, it felt as though time had never passed. "Liam," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I wanted to hate you. I wanted to believe that you had forgotten me, that you had moved on without me. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop loving you, even after everything that happened." A flicker of hope ignited in Liam's eyes as he heard her words. His heart swelled with the realization that Elena hadn't completely given up on them. She had been carrying her own fears, her own scars, and now, in the quiet aftermath of their painful past, there was a chance for them to rebuild what had been broken. "Please don't say that," Liam pleaded, his voice filled with the kind of desperation that only love could create. "Please don't say that you couldn't stop loving me. I couldn't stop loving you either, not for a single moment. Every day without you has been a day wasted. I need you, Elena. I need us." The words he spoke, raw, sincere, and filled with emotion, washed over her like a gentle wave, easing the tension that had held her heart captive for so long. This was the man she had once known. This was the man she had loved with all her heart, and in his arms she could feel that love rekindling, just waiting for a chance to blossom once more. As the tears continued to flow, Elena allowed herself to feel vulnerable. The years of being strong, of shielding her heart from the pain of abandonment, had taken their toll. But now, in this moment of raw honesty, she could finally release the weight she had carried alone. "Liam, she started, her voice faltering as emotions bubbled up. "I never stopped loving you. But I was so scared. Scared that if I let you back in, you'd leave again. I couldn't go through that again." Liam's hands cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I'm never leaving you again. We are stronger now, Elena. Whatever we've been through, whatever we've lost, we can rebuild it. I'll do whatever it takes to prove it to you." There was something in his voice, something that resonated deep within her soul. Liam's words were not just promises, they were a vow, one that would not be broken. Elena's heart softened, and she finally allowed herself to believe him. The years of heartache, the lies, and the betrayal, they were all still there, etched into the fabric of their past, but they didn't have to define their future. With a deep breath, Elena took a step closer, her hands resting on Liam's chest, feeling the warmth of his heartbeat beneath her fingertips. "I'm scared too," she admitted softly, "but I want to try. I want to believe that love can heal everything." Liam smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. It was the first time in years that he had truly smiled with pure joy. "We'll heal, Elena. Together. We don't have to carry the weight of the past anymore. We can leave it behind and start fresh. We're a family now." Her heart swelled with emotion as she looked at him, realizing that he was right. They had the chance to rewrite their story, to create a new chapter, one where love and forgiveness replaced the bitterness and resentment that had once overshadowed their relationship. It wasn't going to be easy, but they had each other, and that was all they truly needed. "I love you, Liam," Elena whispered, her voice full of conviction. Liam's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in years he allowed himself to believe in the possibility of true happiness. Her love was all he had ever wanted. "I love you too, Elena. And I always will." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, knowing that their love had triumphed over everything that had tried to tear them apart. The road ahead would not be without its challenges, but they were ready to face them together, and just as their love had survived the harshest storms, it would continue to bloom, stronger than ever before. The next morning, they woke up to the sound of laughter, the twins running through the house, their joy infectious. Elena smiled as she watched Liam play with them, his eyes filled with a love that matched her own. They were no longer the broken versions of themselves. They had found each other again, and this time they wouldn't let go. With the weight of the past lifted, they stood hand in hand, ready to take on whatever life threw their way. Because they had learned that love, when it is true and pure, will always find a way. And together Eleanor, Liam and the twins began their new life, one full of hope, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond of a love that had won against all odds. The sound of the waves gently lapping at the shore filled the quiet night air, a constant rhythm that had become the heartbeat of their new life. After all the struggles, all the pain and betrayal, Liam Donovan had finally found the peace he'd longed for. a peace he could only find in the arms of the woman he had loved for years, the woman he had lost and fought to win back, Elena. And now, standing on the balcony of their cozy beach house, she was his world. Liam had sold his sprawling empire, relinquishing his cold, sterile office for the warmth of family and love. The thought of boardrooms and business deals felt like another life entirely, one that no longer mattered. What mattered now was the family he had built with Elena and their twins, a family that had come together against all odds. The beach house had been his idea, a place far removed from the fast-paced city where they could escape from the noise of the world and start fresh. The roses in the garden bloomed brightly, their sweet fragrance carried by the breeze, a symbol of Elena's favorite flowers, a little detail he remembered from their past. Tonight, with the twins tucked safely in bed, giggling softly in their sleep, Liam had a surprise for Eleanor. A moment to make everything complete, to seal their love with a memory they would carry for the rest of their lives. Eleanor stood at the balcony, her eyes fixed on the vast ocean, stretching out before her, the stars above reflecting in her gaze. She had come so far, had fought so many battles, against fear, pain, and the scars of the past. But tonight, she felt different. She felt at peace. The storm of their past had calmed, and now she could finally breathe easy. Liam, always so attuned to her, approached from behind. His strong hands wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, the warmth of his body offering comfort and security. His breath was soft against her ear as he whispered, "Do you remember the first time I told you I loved you?" Elena smiled, her heart fluttering at the memory. How could she forget the clumsy, nervous way he had confessed his feelings, nearly spilling his wine on her in the process? The memory always made her laugh, and tonight it brought tears to her eyes as she whispered back, "How could I forget? You were so nervous. You almost spilled wine on me." Liam chuckled softly, his laugh low and comforting. The tension from their past was gone, replaced by a calm certainty. He turned her gently to face him, his hands cupping her cheeks, his eyes steady and full of warmth. "I loved you then, Eleanor," he said softly, his voice filled with deep emotion. "But now, it's deeper, stronger. You gave me the greatest gift, our family. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much you mean to me." The sincerity in his words made Elena's heart swell. She had once been afraid to believe in love again, but in this moment she realized that everything they had been through had only strengthened their bond. She saw the man before her, the same Liam she had fallen in love with all those years ago, but now more whole, more vulnerable, more in love than ever. Before she could say a word, Liam reached into his pocket and Elena's heart skipped a beat. He pulled out a delicate ring, its simplicity radiating elegance, a perfect reflection of their love, uncomplicated but beautiful and enduring. The ring sparkled in the moonlight, and in that moment, Elena felt like she was dreaming. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the precious symbol of their future together. Liam dropped to one knee, his eyes never leaving hers. Every ounce of his being was focused on her. "Marry me, Elena," he said, his voice full of love and hope. "Not because of our past, not just for our future, but for this very moment. Because I can't imagine a single day without you by my side." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. It felt like time had slowed, and all she could hear was the beating of her heart, the love they had shared, the pain they had endured, and the joy they were now experiencing. It all came together in that single moment. "Yes, 1,000 times yes, Eleanor cried, her voice breaking with emotion. She knelt down beside him, cupping his face in her hands as she gazed into his eyes. She had never stopped loving him, and now she was willing to spend forever with him. Their lips met in a kiss that was both gentle and fierce, a promise sealed beneath the stars. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through, everything they had fought for, and everything they would build together. The world around them faded, leaving only the two of them, their hearts beating as one. Later that night, after they had shared their vows, their kiss lingering like the echo of their love, they lay tangled in each other's arms, surrounded by the sound of the ocean. The cool breeze swept through the open window, carrying with it the scent of salt water and love. Liam pulled Eleanor close, his arms wrapped tightly around her. "You're my forever, Elena," he whispered, his voice soft but filled with unbreakable certainty. "And you're my always," Eleanor replied, her fingers tracing the outline of his heart, feeling the rhythm of it beneath her fingertips. They had made it through the darkest of days, and now they were standing at the threshold of a bright, beautiful future. A future where love was their guiding light, a future that held no more secrets or betrayals. The next morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, the family was complete. Liam, Elena, and their twins had found their happily ever after. The world outside was filled with noise and distractions, but in their little corner of paradise, all that mattered was the love they shared. Their story was no longer one of second chances. It was a story of rebirth, of enduring love, and of the power of family. Liam had lost his empire, but he had gained something far greater: Elena, their children, and a future filled with endless possibilities. As they stood together, their hands entwined, watching the waves crash against the shore, they knew one thing for certain: their love would never fade. It would only grow stronger with time, and as long as they had each other, they had everything they needed. And so they walked forward together, ready to embrace whatever life had in store, knowing that love above all else had won against all odds.